everyone. From his election 2 years ago to his recent visit to the US, Pope Francis has been a very controversial figure. His statements about economics, social issues, and the environment have drawn criticism from the political right and left in turns. In fact, none other than America's favorite demagogue, Donald Trump, recently criticized the Holy Father for his comments on immigration, saying the Pope is a very political person who doesn't understand the problems our country has. So today, I'm going to talk about the Pope, and why his views aren't as extreme or as new as some think. However, many of the Pope's critics are Christians who object to the very idea of the papacy. So to start off, I'll talk about this office's role in the Church and what papal infallibility really means. To summarize the Pope's role in the Catholic Church, he is its chief shepherd and its head on earth. Of course, Christ is the true head of the Church, but until he returns, the Popes are here to keep things in line. It's a lot like Denethor from Lord of the Rings. His family were stewards of Gondor while the line of true kings was in exile. The Popes are the stewards of the Church, not its kings. And just like stewards of a kingdom, the office of the Pope was created by the king, by Christ himself. Matthew chapter 16 states, Jesus said to them, "But who do you say that I am?" Simon Peter replied, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." And Jesus answered him, "Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. And I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades shall not prevail against it." Jesus gave Simon a new name, Peter, Kephas in Aramaic, meaning rock, and told him that on this rock, Kephas, Peter, he would build his church. Peter was the first pope, and became the first bishop of Rome, so the Pope's Holy See remains there to this day. Peter's special commission to be the rock of the church was passed down to his successor, and so on through the centuries to the present day. A major part of the Pope's role as steward of the Church is his papal infallibility. It's one of the major objections many Protestants have to the Pope, but it's completely misunderstood by most of its critics. So let's start by looking at what papal infallibility doesn't mean. It does not mean that the Pope can never commit sins. He's just as human as anyone else. It also doesn't mean the Pope can never be wrong. Several popes throughout history have supported slavery, for example. So what does papal infallibility mean? It means that, specifically when speaking about the Church's teachings on faith and morals, the Pope cannot be in error. As the steward of the Church, he is protected by the Holy Spirit from teaching error, even if the truth conflicts with his personal beliefs. The Gospels support this as well. Jesus tells Peter in Matthew chapter 16 verse 18 that the gates of hell will not prevail against the Church. This means that neither the Church nor its earthly head will be completely destroyed, either by external forces or internally by apostasy. So, no matter what, the Church will continue and persist in teaching the truth. Another important note about papal infallibility is that it can only be used to shape Church teaching when the Pope speaks about a theological matter above and beyond already present dogma. For example, if Pope Francis came out today and gave an official declaration stating that Christ was born of a virgin, it would have nothing to do with papal infallibility, because that's already part of Church dogma. In fact, the concept has only been used to shape Church teaching a handful of times. The only two examples in the last 2 centuries were declarations upholding Mary's Immaculate Conception and her Assumption into heaven. So overall, it's a much more reasonable and justified concept than most non-Catholics think it is. With that out of the way, let's look at Pope Francis specifically. He's drawn most of his criticism from the political right due to his belief in human-induced global warming, as well as his encyclical on the same topic. Let's look at some quotes. "Preservation of the environment, promotion of sustainable development, and particular attention to climate change are matters of grave concern for the entire human family. We cannot interfere in one area of the ecosystem without paying due attention to both the consequences of such interference in other areas and to the well-being of future generations." But wait, surprise! Those quotes are actually from Pope Benedict XVI and Pope St. John Paul II. As it turns out, popes have been advocating for responsible care of the environment for decades, global warming or no. And Pope Francis's belief in man-made global warming was not intended to be binding on all Catholics. His encyclical, Laudato Si, explicitly states this. While the Pope's view was not made in the absence of evidence, and I would tend to agree with his position, the science is far from settled and Catholics can in good conscience hold either position. The important message to take from Laudato Si is that our impact on the environment, since it is God's creation, has a moral aspect to it that we have to take into account. Let's tackle another common objection. Pope Francis has been criticized for his seemingly socialist views on the economy, saying, "The global financial crisis was proof that capitalism does not protect the weakest members of society. It is alarming to see hotbeds of tension and conflict caused by growing instances of inequality between rich and poor, by the prevalence of a selfish and individualistic mindset which also finds expression in an unregulated financial capitalism." Oops, I did it again. Silly me, those quotes are from Pope Benedict just a few years ago. The point I'm trying to get at is that Pope Francis's remarks on the excesses of capitalism aren't radical or revolutionary. All he's saying is that capitalism, without a spirit of Christian charity, has had its fair share of moral failings recently. He's completely in line with what previous popes have said. So then why are his remarks treated like they're something unusual or new? Well, to get a better idea, let's turn from his statements on economic issues to his statements on social issues. Every few months, you'll see a headline like this. Or this. And let's not forget all of these. Is Pope Francis really a radical reformer, changing that dusty old church's antiquated teachings on social issues? Nope. Let's break it down. To start with the most well-known and most misunderstood quote, his "Who am I to judge" statement was not a promotion or acceptance of homosexuality. The question he was responding to was referring to a specific priest, and his full statement was, "If someone is gay and is searching for the Lord and has goodwill, then who am I to judge him?" This strongly implies the Pope was referring to same-sex attractions, which he has confirmed in later statements and in his recent book-length interview, The Name of God is Mercy. Regarding same-sex attractions, this is the same thing the Church has always said. They are a cross like any other. A person can be gay, meaning they have same-sex attractions, and still seek the Lord and live in accordance with the Church's teachings. The other headlines are similarly misleading. For example, this one from MSNBC, it's about confession. Not allowing sin, but confession. So why are these misleading headlines so common? They create a narrative that the Church is changing, turning away from its teaching and embracing the world's views. And ultimately, that's what the world wants, for the Pope and his Church to become malleable, to stop being the rock of truth that calls out the failings in every generation. But, we can tell you how many empires and dictatorships tried to tell the Church what to do, but that would take 2,000 years. While Pope Francis may not be changing Church teaching, his papacy has definitely brought about a change in emphasis. Culture war issues, like abortion and gay marriage, are far less prevalent, while there's been a renewed emphasis on helping the poor and less fortunate. Why is this? Well, look at the name Cardinal Bergoglio chose when he became Pope. Francis. A name not used by any other pope before, hearkening back to a medieval saint who revitalized the Church in his day. Saint Francis truly led a life in imitation of Christ, giving everything he had to serve the poor and even receiving the stigmata. Pope Francis is trying to follow the same path. He has said multiple times that the Church's dedication to the culture wars had caused it to fall into the trap of an NGO, emphasizing advocacy over evangelization. That's not to say these issues aren't important, but just that actions speak louder than words. Living out Christ's teachings in a radical, transformative way, such that St. Francis achieved and Pope Francis is working towards, shines an incredible light in an otherwise dark world. Yes, we must be able to defend the precepts of our faith, but it is living these precepts out that will bring the world to Christ. It is what He wants for our lives. Something to reflect on this Lenten season, at the very least. Ad Mahorem Dei Gloriam. Thanks so much for watching.